Question. Rabbi Yechezkel Levinstein was a famous Rosh Yeshiva, asked his student, whom do you trust more? A pilot or MD, a physician? What do you think?
I go with the pilot.
Pilot.
Because his life is at stake too.
His life. Okay. What else?
I just know I never question the pilot, and I find myself questioning doctors.
Doctors? Like, let's say, a surgeon that is a well-reputable surgeon.
Don't trust either of them, trust only in Hashem.
In Hashem. All right. So what happened is the student debated over that. Some said pilot, some said a surgeon.
And one said Hashem.
Some said
Just one.
Hashem.
That's a song.
So he answered beautifully and he said, look, when you go to a physician, a surgeon, for example, you go and you have a second opinion, and you have a third opinion. Even you have a cataract, even you have a small procedure, you check, and you go before the surgery. And the doctors go to you and said, don't worry, I'm doing that for many, many years. It's something that people go through. It's a procedure. Everything will be lovely. And some patients, what they think? I would like to switch. You'll be in this bed. I'll be the one who stand here and say it, right? The pilot, people goes on a plane.
No question.
They travel overseas. They figured out, they go over the water, they never met him, they don't know what's the nationality and who is he and or she sometimes and what they do.
Credentials.
But they just go up and trust him. The reason, as he mentioned, it's because he is also there. So it means it's a huge difference between if the person himself involved versus when I was in the service. So I remember when we are in the mission, in the field, we used to have a chaplain whose name is Foreman, Rabbi Foreman. He used to come with us almost everywhere. And I remember the attitude the non-observant soldiers have toward him with such an admiration, because he wasn't one of those rabbis that's sitting in the office and just checking the mezuzahs or kashrus and never involved with the real war time. But he bothered to go everywhere, anywhere, all the time, and be with us in the real action as much as he was allowed. So today we're going to study page 101. We'll start with 100b. The first subject is how you trust and how you hold an attitude to the rabbis versus Torah. In general, people has this mindset, and I cannot tell you how many times I hear that. Oh, is that rabbinic or is it in the Bible? Right? Oh, if it's in the Bible, that's serious. We have to take it seriously. If it's made by the rabbis, the rabbis argue, the rabbis have the rules. Attitude. People have this attitude toward. So the reality is, the rabbis came in, and because in some cases it was a consensus, for example, the subject we're going to discuss, which is the type of violation of rabbinic law, that the rabbis was very serious about it. The rabbis went an extra mile and said, we put an extraordinary fine against people who violate rabbinic law and make it stronger than Torah. Meaning, if a person in violation of rabbinic law, he is going to be in charge with much heavier than violation of Torah law. An example, Kohen Gadol, the high priest. The Torah said that he cannot marry a
widower,
Widow.
or a divorcee.
Right? If he married, he violated Torah law. Kohen Gadol married a widow. He gave her the Ketubah, the marriage contract. The Ketubah is rabbinic, right? What we're saying, the Ketubah is valid. Even the Kohen Gadol is in violation of Torah laws, yet the Ketubah is valid. However, if someone is in violation of rabbinic law, what is rabbinic law called? It's called Shniyot la'arayot. Shniyot la'arayot, in general, is if someone married the second degree, like mother of his mother. Just using an example. There are many examples of Shniyot la'arayot, which is the woman that connected to her husband in the level that it's the rabbinic law prohibited their relationships, right? The mother of his mother. Okay, so here the Tractate Yevamot, page 21, have a list of second degree. Here you are in violation of rabbinic law. Guess what? If you give her Ketubah, a marriage contract, is what? Is invalid. Which means she hopefully will think twice before consenting to that marriage, because she knows if it's a breakup, she gets nothing. Because the same way as the rabbis instituted the marriage contract, the rabbis have the right to abrogate it. Second subject, we're going to discuss a situation, for example, and variant of that situation. It was a betrothal, it was engagement. And he was in such a love. Do you know anyone like that? And he gave her a very, very expensive diamond ring. Right? I saw this week. It was a rabbi that was involved in the bedding that did the giyur. So I met him this week. He said that she took off her jewelry, that lady in Baltimore, and one of her rings was like $85,000 ring. She works in the Pentagon. Anyway, so this man engaged with this girl, lady, and he gave her a very expensive ring. Then guess what? She had all kind of personality and issues, and basically they broke up. So it's a religious family. He went to her father and he said, I would like to get back the expensive ring, right? The father said, you know, she's going through a very big emotional procedure. Do you mind to wait? He said, fine. Months later, he sees the father in the synagogue. He says, what's going on with my ring? The father said, you're right, I'm sorry, I totally forget about it, let me talk to her. He talked to her, and guess what happened? No, she sold it. So he take the father to a Bet Din, and he asked a question, do you hold din arevut? Arevut meaning, it's like a co-signer. I approach you, I'm a religious guy, I didn't approach her, I approach you. You told me, don't worry, I'll take care of that. That was the day after we broke up. The father said, I'm not a Rev, I'm not holding responsibility. So we're going to discuss that. So we are on the bottom of page 100b at the Mishnah. הממאנת השנייה והאילונית. The Mishnah speaks about situation at list of circumstance of women that do not exercise the Ketubah, and if they received the marriage contract is invalid. Number one is the one mema'enet, the minor who refuses to continue living with her husband. Refreshing our memory from Yevamot, a young, very young girl that lost her father, her older brother or the mother can marry her by the rabbinic law. That marriage is valid and invalid. It is valid if she passed the age of maturity and she wished to stay with him, then this marriage is total, effective, and valid. However, she have the right of refusal, which means she can come out at any time and said, I do not wish to stay with him, and everything is void. The whole marriage is off. So if she received as a minor a Ketubah from her husband, the moment she refused him, she lost the Ketubah. Second case is the forbidden relative by rabbinic law. As we explained, it's a list on Tractate Yevamot, page 21. Example is marriage between a person, his mother of his mother. Right? That's second degree violation by rabbinic law. The Ketubah that received has no validity. The third one is called Ailonit, which means the one that have undevelopment in a manner of body in a woman. It's called Ailonit. Some say that even the ancient Sarah has some resemblance of that. If you know that she get pregnant in a very miraculous way at the very end of her lives. But the idea is, some say that she wasn't, but anyway, the idea is that the one who cannot have children, so it's a disputation about Ailonit, but it's the one who shows some side of female, but that can appear in a different age time. But the idea is by rabbinic law, follow Tractate Nida, page 47b, only when she reached the age of 20, we know clearly who is she. So it means in that situation, if the husband divorced them or passed away, is no way for them to receive the payment. And the next one is velo peirot. Velo peirot, meaning not receive, not entitled to have the produce that the husband consumed. So Rashi, I explained in my book on Rashi, Rashi said, Velo perot din perot, and he goes on to say, etc., etc., V'id amri klomar af lo perot. So it means, Rashi have here two different avenues. The first one is speak about the law that involved with the produce, which means the sages instituted for the wife that in exchange of the right for the produce from her husband, if she is in a captivity, he needs to pay off. But in these three categories of women, remember, the Mema'enet, the Shniya, and Ailonit doesn't have this rule, which means the husband does not carry that obligation. So it means Velo Perot is like, in a sense, like the Ketubah and the sustenance, but the Ritva and the Ran and others doesn't hold that way. If you read further in my book, this is one of the klomar that I have pages upon pages upon pages in my book of explanation of this Rashi, because here you go by so many, Yerushalmi, Ritva, Rashba, Pnei Yoshua, and so many more that involved with what did Rashi meant here. Anyway, it's based on the Gemara in Yevamot 84, and you're welcome to read more. Anyway, velo mezonot, and not sustenance from her husband, which means take a situation that she took a loan while they're married. He was outside. He went to China. She took a loan. He come back, right? He wasn't familiar with that. So in a general term, we have here the obligation of the husband to support his wife as long as they marry, and also all the sustenance that she received from his estate. That's part of the stipulation in the Ketubah contract. So the moment they have no ketubah, then all the stipulations, all the obligations, it's not it's not part of his commitment. Velo blaot. Blaot, later we elaborate, but in general, it's worn clothes. Remember, number one, historical context. In those days, it was a lot of poverty. But also, here we speak about dowry. She brought a lot of stuff when they get married. One of them, for example, it's beautiful clothes to him. He wore it, right? And Tosfot explained that, guess what? Typically, those clothes, you know, when there's a fight, there's nothing worse than a family feud, right? When there's a fight, she wants everything and anything, right? Happens sometimes, and vice versa. So now, he doesn't need to pay the difference, he needs to return, but the difference between the clothes that was when he wore it until the time he gave it to her, he doesn't need to pay. Also, the value of those clothes between the time of their marriage to the time that they break up, that's not something that she will receive, versus in a regular marriage that it's a subject to discuss. Now, when it's come to Ilonit, as we explained, that woman that does not develop maturity, so they said, Im mitchila nesa'a leshem Ilonit, meaning if the man knew clearly in advance that she have this physical limitation, yesh la ketubah, meaning she deserved to have the right, like regular marriage, of the marriage contract. The Ritva elaborates and said it's not only ketubah, it can be all the other additional consequences, additional commitments that involve in the manner of marriage. Ketubah is just prime example, he explained. But the idea is that the whole Ilonit issue is called mekach ta'ut, which means I wasn't aware that she had this undeveloped issue when we met, and I didn't know that she had. So if he know that, so then it's a different story. Almana lechohen gadol. Here an example of even those marriages who involve with violation, but the ketubah they still deserve, such as a widow that married to a high priest, grusha v'chalutza lechohen ediot, a divorcee and the one who's chalutza. You remember the chalutza, that one that waiting for levirate marriage and was released, that married the regular kohen, mamzeret untina liYisrael, bat Yisrael natin umamzer, all these list, yesh lahem ketubah, they entitled to payment of a marriage contract. So what do you see from here? That the rabbis are much stringent over their regulation, because the reality is people have this mentality to think, I have nothing to lose, so I'm in violation of rabbinic law, but I'm not going to lose anything. Versus if she knows that she is going to lose the ketubah if she marries him, then hopefully they take it under consideration and do not involve in this type of violation. Now we have a different discussion over the girsaot, the exact wording in the Mishnah. Rav Tani, Ktana yotz'a beget ein la ketubah. A minor girl that the mother or the older brother married her, she divorced her husband without ketubah. Why? Because the validity of marriage between a minor by the rabbinic law has different framework. So if even it's the other way around, which means the husband made a decision to break up with this minor girl, he does not need to pay the Ketubah contract, וכל שכן ממאנת, and how much so if she exercises a right to refuse a husband, because she voluntarily break up with him. שמואל תנא, ממאנת אין לה כתובה, אבל, however, יוצאה בגט יש לה כתובה. However, the moment the sages instituted that there is a validity of marriage between a minor and a man, so therefore that kiddushin, that matter of betrothed and marriage has validity by a mother, by a brother, etc. Therefore, if the husband decided to break up, he needs to give her a get, and in exchange she deserves to receive the money for the Ketubah. So, you see here a big differentiation between her breaking up and his breaking up, right? It's a famous response of the rabbis during the era of the British Mandate. We are speaking at the 40s, during World War II and post-World War II, before the establishment of the state. Many Jews worldwide want to have the certificate in order to enter the land, turned to be land of Israel. One of the ways to circumvent the system is to declare as a couple. Usually it's like in America, right? American man or American woman married someone who's in a different country. So in some cases, people does that to get a green card, right? To get citizenship, whatever, right? So they have some, no, not real, whatever it's called, not real marriage, right? So the question is, if couple have this type of marriage, they don't have anything between them, but they sign all the papers by the civil court, whatever you call it, it's a federal court, that they are a couple. And then they break up, right? And they did it for the papers, right? Is she considering a divorcee and prohibited to Kohen? Or since it wasn't Leshem Kiddushin, since it wasn't the intent of getting married, so maybe she allowed to marry a Kohen and she's not considering this a divorcee. Follow me? Mm-hmm. It's a discussion based on this Gemara among the rabbis. All right? There is a story about Shlomo Eiger. Shlomo Eiger, he was the one who take over Rabbi Akiva Eiger, big rabbi in Europe. The story is, it was a community that the local small village rabbi was very uneducated person, and he was the shochet, the mohel, did everything. So it was a woman that divorced, and as we said, he wasn't so familiar with halakha, and she divorced from a man and she married another person, and he married them less than 3 months after she divorced. You remember the issue? She needs, by Jewish law, a 3 months period to wait until she is able to marry someone else in order to clarify that there is no baby involved from the previous husband. Now, unfortunately, she delivered a baby after she got married from the second husband, and then the second husband shortly afterward passed away, and she wanted to name the child after the second husband. So the question he asked is, what do you do here? Do you take her? There is a concept in halakha we discussed, for example, the law of deserted wife, that sometimes you have ed echad ne'eman, sometimes you have one witness that you take as a trustworthy. Is she as a trustworthy witness to say that this is from the second husband, if she said definitely that she is basically get pregnant from him, or you say that since she's talking about herself and since the marriage took place less than 3 months after she divorced the first one, then is the issue of legitimacy of that child. He discussed it. ואז דא שמואל לטעמי, דאמר שמואל, ממאנת אין לה כתובה. The one that left her husband, this minor, at her own will, she do not deserve to receive the compensation of marriage contract. יוצאה בגט יש לה כתובה. However, if the husband wished to divorce her, so she received the marriage contract from him. ממאנת, if this minor refuses to stay with her husband, לא פסלה מן האחים, which means, you remember the issue of brothers. The brothers basically are not entitled to marry one that the brother married, Leviticus 18. However, the question is, if you tell me that it wasn't a final stage of marriage, and since they broke up, in that sense, the brothers can marry her. And it's like retroactive act that she wasn't, by halacha, considered ever married. Furthermore, the rabbis go that even it was intercourse between them, it's still in that sense not considering a marriage. Remember the circumstance, this is a minor, this is the breaking up, etc. Velo psala mina kehuna. She will not have the law of divorcee that cannot marry by the Torah law to Kohen, which is, the Torah said in Leviticus 18, verses 16, that a person cannot marry the wife of his brother, regardless if she get the get or the brother passed away, excluding the law of Yibum, Deuteronomy 25. But if it was a mi'un, basically retroactively it abrogated the marriage. יוצאה בגט, פסלה מן האחים ופסלה מן הכהונה. However, if he divorced her and he gave her the get, then it's already a wife of the brother. The brothers cannot marry her, and a Kohen can no longer marry her because she is considering now a divorcee. ממאנת אינה צריכה להמתין 3 חודשים. But because she is in the matter of refusal, she doesn't need to wait 3 months before remarrying, as other women who separated from their husbands must. 101. יוצאה בגט צריכה להמתין 3 חודשים. We explained several times, this is important rule. The moment there is a marriage breakup and is received the get, the rabbi said that regardless if it's a widow or regular divorcee, she have to wait 3 months. It's clear that if it's a baby involved here, we need to know if it's related to the first or the second husband. So you remember we studied that in Yevamot, page 41. Maika mashmelan. So it means we explain that there's a difference between minor that divorced, that minor that refused their husband, total different rulings. What Shmuel wants to teach us here, Tanina kulhu. We learned that on Tractate Yevamot, page 108. Hamema'enet be'ish, if a minor refuse to stay in a marriage with a husband, hu mutar bikrovoteha, he allow after the breakup to marry her immediate family, vehi muteret bikrovav, and she allowed to marry his immediate family, velo psala min hakuna, and he, by breaking up, he is not make her unaccepted for married a Kohen. Natan laget, however, if he initiated the divorce and he gave her bill of divorce, who asur bikrovotea, he is prohibited to marry her immediate family. Vehi asura bikrovav, she cannot marry his family. Upsala min hakuna, by giving her the get, he automatically put the boundaries against her marry a Kohen. Which here you see a huge difference, according to Shmuel, between a minor that refused and the minor that received a get, in addition to those Ketubah manner that we mentioned in the Mishnah. So why Shmuel needs to teach us that? So they said, צריכה להמתין 3 חודשים הצטריכה ליה. We learn from that an additional important halacha, the waiting period of 3 months. The lotnan, because you don't see that in any Mishnah. So by the way, he mentioned the other halachot. Leima ketanai, which means you may say that in juxtaposition between this disputation Rav and Shmuel, they are an equivalent disputation. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, en ma'aseh ktana klum. Rabbi Eliezer disputed all this marriage of a minor. Remember, when we study Yevamot, the marriage of a minor is a protection. We don't want her to be in a situation that men outside get contact with her and abuse her or do all kind of thing with her. We want to protect this poor little girl. So in that sense, we make, as a rabbis, we make valid marriage for her by appointed guardian, by her older brother, by her mother. Here, Rabbi Eliezer said, no, even by rabbinic law, it's no validity, right? She doesn't develop her decisions, her mindset, her body. You cannot call it a valid marriage. Ve'ein ba'ala zakai b'mtzi'ata, in a regular manner of marriage, if the wife found something, it's go to her husband, right? But here it's not. Ve'lo b'ma'aseh yadeh, if she have any type of income, of labor, he has no access to that. Ve'lo be'afarat nedareha, usually in a manner the Torah said that the husband can abrogate it, can annul his wife commitments, vows. Here he cannot do that. Ve'no yorsha, if she have estate, usually the husband inherited his wife's estate. Since this minor is not considering by him, by Rabbi Eliezer, a valid marriage, so therefore if it's estate involved, the husband will not inherit that. Ve'no metamela, if he was a kohen, he cannot come attached to her corpse, to her body, if she passed away. Klalo shel davar, in general, by his view, Rabbi Eliezer hold, eina keishto lechol davar. Even by rabbinic law, she have no category of regular, valid husband-wife relationship. Ela shetzricha mi'un. But with all that said, Rabbi Eliezer said, she still need to declare refusal from him to free her and go out and marry whoever she wished to. Rabbi Yoshua disagree. Rabbi Yoshua Omer, ma'aseh ktana klum, which means since we hold that she is married by rabbinic law, so we hold valid marriage to her husband. Uba'ala zakai b'mtziata u'b'ma'aseh yadea, the husband entitled to her found article and her income. U'be'afarat nedareha, if the marriage is valid, he can abrogate her vows. Ve'yorsha, if she passed, he entitled to that, to her estate. U'metamela, like regular kohen, that kohen allowed to contact his 7 immediate family. We discussed this last week in the Torah portion of Emor. So one of the 7 immediate family is a wife, and if she is married to him, even by that rabbinic law, it's carry validity and allowed to contact her body. Klalo shel davar, harei keishto lechol davar, just the opposite. She is considering total wife. Ela, the only difference is, she yotza b'mi'un, she doesn't need the get. It's sufficient for her to declare that she refused to stay with him, and the marriage is off, even it was interaction, meaning some manner of cohabitation between the two. Rabbi Akiva Iger, based on this, asked many questions in the whole concept of mi'un, of refusal and betrothed. He said, what exactly the definition of a wife that's making a vow? If you tell me that is a matter of betrothed and a husband and wife, we understand Torah gives the husband the right to take off, to annul her vows. But if you say that it's half and a half, what happens if she make a verbal vow, a verbal commitment? Who hold the responsibility for that minor? He has a long response of Rabbi Akiva Iger. Anyway, Lema. So now the Gemara elaborate on this disputation. Rav de Amar Rabbi Eliezer u'Shmuel de Amar Rabbi Yoshua. You see here matching disputation between two pairs of rabbis. You say that the Rav hold that a minor can receive a get, doesn't have the Ketubah, hold the same as Rabbi Eliezer, that all of her income, the husband has no access, versus Shmuel that match Rabbi Yoshua that said that it's valid. So the Gemara rejected. Aliba de Rabbi Eliezer kule alma lo plige. So I explained in my book, Rashi here said, כלומר, דאמר שמואל, דאמר כרבי יהושע, ולא כרבי אליעזר שפיר כאמר. So it means that here you have someone who disputed Rabbi Yoshua, which means the explanation, the interpretation of Rabbi Eliezer, it's not the issue. Because everyone agreed, according to his view, that the minor doesn't have a Ketubah. But, meaning according to Rav. But Shmuel, that disputed him, it's not so clear that he matched Rabbi Eliezer. כי פליגי אליבא דרבי יהושע, שמואל כרבי יהושע. Rashi said, כלומר, דאמת רב כרבי אליעזר ולא כרבי יהושע ליתא, דרב אפילו רבי יהושע אמרה. So it means that Rabbi Yoshua views is basically match everyone. עד כאן לא כאמר רבי יהושע טעם, אלא מדידה לדידי. The right that he received from her. אבל מדידי לדידה לא. But the right that he received from her, even Rabbi Yoshua hold that she will not entitle, because the rabbis wants to make this marriage institution for her benefit, for her sake, for her protection. So they give the husband those rights of marriages in order to avoid a problem in the future, that maybe other men doesn't want to marry her. But you cannot compare the disputation between Rav and Shmuel to the disputation of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. The Mishna continued and said, Velo blaot. You remember all those clothing that she brings in her dowry when they marry, then when they break up, she get it back, but the worn part of the clothing, she will not entitle. So the Gemara limited that and said, Amar le Ravuna Barchia le Rav Kahana, אמרת לנו נשמי דשמואל לא שנו אלא נכסי מילוג אבל נכסי צאן ברזל איתלה. Refreshing our memory. Women bring something to her marriage. Either נכסי צאן ברזל, נכסי צאן ברזל, it's a property that she brings, is like, use the term צאן ברזל, is like livestock. You have 3 goats. So the 3 goats she bringing, you have evaluation. The 3 goats worth $6,000. All right, that's a value of 3 goats that, regardless to her circumstance, is hair. So in that sense, it makes no difference if the 3 goats turn to be 300 goats, right? Or is 0 goats left, right? This something that incorporated within her Ketubah, and if it's a breakup, she received that evaluation, which is 3 goats, meaning for our discussion $6,000, right? Just as an example, right? That's barzel, that's like iron. You cannot break. Nichsei milog is a produce that will not incorporate in Ketubah, which means, again, it's all a variation of the contract that was written. Any estate that she brought, it's the produce that come out of her estate. For example, if she have an orchard of oranges, and the husband is now in charge for that, so he allowed to eat the produce, he allowed to make it and sell it and do all kind of things with that manner, and that access, since is not incorporated in the Ketubah, is when it's a breakup, it's a different story. She doesn't have a total access to that. So he said, here it's come to what? Nichsei milog. but Nichsei Tzon Barzel, she have the access. So she received even the depreciation of that cloth. So here, you should know that in nowadays is a very big response from Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, the late Rav Wozner, others. How do you treat Ketubah contract nowadays? Because many times we have the Tosefet Ketubah, the additional information in Ketubah. Do you treat it in Nichsei Tzon Barzel? You treat it in Milog? How you treated our Ketubah nowadays? Big response. Anyway, Havei Bar Rav Papa, Ahaya. Which one of the three category of women Rav Papa discussed? If you tell me that Rav Kahana speaks about what? About a minor that refused to live with her husband and backing out the marriage, which means that she initiated the breakup as a minor. If those clothes that she brought, it's still in that position, which means when she is refused him, ve'idi shakla, it's her. It's her, meaning regardless if it's Nichsei Tzon Barzel or Nichsei Milog, it's part of her. So Rashi said, if she passed away, he inherited her, and therefore he doesn't need to pay. Not everyone agree with that. Many Rishonim, the Ran for example, and others said, the moment she exercised the mi'un, the refusal, or that obligation are void. Ve'id the late nehu, if it's not existed at the time that she refused, the husband used them until they worn up. Idi ve'idi lo shakla. So either way, that she's no longer can to take neither milog or nichsei barzel. So because those nichsei tzon barzel, he has the right to access. The Ran explains. Ela, so the second option, Ailonit. You have to say that all of that speaks about case of Ailonit, which means that Shmuel's statement speak about undeveloped a woman. If those clothing are there when they break up, idi ve'idi shakla, ida leitenehu, ipcha mibayalei, nichsei milog de birshuta kaimei, nichsei milog at its her estate, during the entire marriage time. So the Ritva explained that he cannot use them. Itla, she have the rights to all those worn out. So she gets a compensation for that. Nichsei tzon barzel, however, the lav birshutei kaimei, because that's something that the husband have an access and he is totally responsible and he can use that estate the way he wished to late landba. So he have her consent to use it, and therefore she cannot claim for all the worn up materials. So she could not claim a compensation. So Rav Papa concluded, Ela Ashniya, you have to say that this is a case of second degree of violation, the rabbinic degree, and therefore the cloth that does not apply, not exist at the time of the breaking up, the divorce, and therefore kansu rabanan ledidei bedidei. So since that marriage was prohibited, I explained in my book, Rashi said here, klomar מדינה אפחי מבעלי, אלא חכמים הפכו את הדבר לעקור מהם תורת נישואין. So it means that it appears, that's the way also Tosfot said, that we should treat it much seriously, the nichsei tzon barzel, more than the milog. But here the rabbis came in and put a special fine that she will not get what in a usual case she entitled to, which is the compensation of the Ketubah, the produce, the sustenance, the compensation of the worn-up clothing, uldidei bedida, and he also needs to pay compensation of nichsei tzon barzel that he doesn't need to do in a regular case. So you see from here that this rabbi go an extraordinary fine because they violated rabbinic law. So as we said, derivative from that is the discussion among the rabbis over a case of breaking up after engagement. Remember, I gave you the case, for example, of a expensive jewelry that he gave her as a engagee, and he is suing now her father for being the responsible one. Here you derive from this the big question: how far you go with this situation? Is the father is really responsible or not? So in conclusion, so far, according to Rav Kahana, when the Mishnah used the term velo blaot, it's not a final principle, but it means it's depend upon one of the three categories: minor, ailonit, or the second degree of arayot. Amar Rav Shimi bar Ashi shma mina de Rav Kahana aila leiglima. If she brought a cloth as a nichsei milog karna ha'avei, that she have the principle, velo mechasela ve'azil adevale, but he may not go and cover himself with it until it worns out. Which means that we do not say that using that clothing, it's considering the same as consuming a produce, and he can use it until it's worn out. Marav Nachman Peira Avi, but we just said on page 79 that using clothing is the same as using a produce, and not it's a basic principle. So they said the Rav Nachman Pliga, meaning Rav Nachman disputed Rav Kahana. So one of the greatest Spanish rabbi was a rabbi that wrote a book called Chokrei Lev. He asked a question: what happened if someone marry a mamzeret, which means a girl that was born out of violation, abominative relationship, and she is basically illegitimate child. So if he married her, she is basically prohibited to him. Yet if he married her, the husband can annul her vows. The Rambam have a big discussion. If a person marries someone that prohibited to him by rabbinic law, but he said when it's come to abrogate the vows, it's he can do it. So he asked, there is a clear Tosefta that said that you can, that since it's a violation, you cannot do it. So Chokrei Lev disputed this Rambam, and he said the moment that the person is in violation of rabbinic law, he can no longer exercise the right of abrogated vows. So if you make a vow, it's a valid vow, and he cannot annul it. So the Mishnah said all these three categories, mema'enet, shniya, and ailonit, all the three categories, en lahem ketubah, they not receive as a fine, rabbinic fine, they not receive the marriage contract. Amar Shmuel lo shanu ela mane 200, aval tosefet yesh lahem. We explained many times when it's come to Ketubah contract, there is a foundation, which is for virgin 200, for regular meaning to situation of the second marriage, etc., it's 100. The additional payment of the Ketubah, which called the Tosefet, that's any amount, as the Mishnah said in 54, any amount that the husband wish, that's something that they have the access. That's not part of the essence of the Ketubah, that's the additional part. Tanyana me'ach, Nashim שאמרו חכמים אין להם כתובה כגון הממאן וחברותיה, אין להם מנה ו200. אבל תוספת יש להם. This is again, there's something that the husband add to a Ketubah, in addition. נשים שאמרו חכמים יוצאות שלא בכתובה כגון עוברת על דת וחברותיה, that's what we study in 72, אין להם תוספת וכל שכן מנה ו200. So again, here we speak about severe violation. והיוצאת, המשנה continue משום שם רע, if the reason that the break up is because she get a reputation that she was unfaithful to him. נוטלת מה שלפניה ויוצאה, she carries the נכסי מילוג by the early part and not by the late. So the Khatam Sofer have a responsa. They ask him about gift that the husband give to his wife. during the course of marriages, there are gifts involved. So if there are gifts, I give it a short point. If there are gifts that was given before she was involved with relationship with another man out of marriage, before that affair, so he cannot get it back. Those gifts that he gave her after she had an affair, she must return it to her husband. מסייע לה לרב הונא, דאמר רב הונא זינתה לא הפסידה. Rav Huna said the woman that was unfaithful didn't lost 101b, בלעותיה קיימים, which means all her right to her worn out clothes, so it still applies, which means she retained to all of her possession the right to and all the other items that not worn out, it's her. תני תנא קמי דרב נחמן, זינתה הפסידה בלעותיה קיימים. So if she wasn't faithful, so she lost. But when they divorce, she does not keep the clothing. אמר לה אם זינתה כליה מזנאי, why are you blaming the clothes? תני לא הפסידה בלעותיה קיימים. So he said here, she had not lost the right to extend worn clothes. So here, as a side note, there is a book called Emek She'ela, and he asked a question. It was a case of a woman that was pregnant, and the husband wasn't around for a long time, like more than a year. He left, and when she's supposed to deliver the child, which is 9-month normal pregnancy, she went to the doctor, and in short, the doctor said she's not ready. It was a rare case that the baby was delivered 14 months after the husband was departed. Now, here's the problem. The baby was born huge, way more than average size. For sure she claimed that it's from her husband. The doctor said he never saw a case like that, never saw a baby like that. The husband wasn't around for about 13, almost 14 months. So do you say that that baby is from someone else, or you treat it as a rare case, especially since she attended the doctor said that it's one of those rare cases that the child is legitimate and it's a regular child. So again, this is the Emek She'ela question based on this Gemara.
Well, the Beit Din accept evidence, like genetic evidence?
You talking modern days?
Yeah.
Rabbi, it's a good question. The late Rabbi Oldenburg, the Tzitz Eliezer, who was the head of the rabbinic court in Jerusalem, have a long response over that. In general, there are some cases. It was a Shaare Tzedek hospital, doctor by the name of Dr. Meir, that he was in an advisory board for that Beit Din, and it was a case like that. And Rabbi Oldenburg responded. It's a long response, but it's a subject that in short, it's a possibility. Yes, it's really depend on this in a case. Amar Rabba bar Rab Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. זו דברי רבי מנחם סתימתה, אבל חכמים אומרים זינתה לא הפסידה בלעותיה קיימים. So basically we follow by the majority of the sages so that's the reason why Rav Nachman objected, and he wants to say to change the view of Rabbi Nachem in a regular case, because then people go that is a final halacha. So he said that you go by the stam, by the regular case, follow the majority of the sages. So then the Mishnah said, אם מתחילה נשאה, if he knew in advance that she have these physical issues, which means that she have issue of maturity and not physical development, so therefore she entitled to receive the Ketubah in a case of divorce. So you see here a disputation among the rabbis between Ailonit, those cases, and the widow of the high priest. Amar Rav Huna, in regards to collecting the Ketubah contract, Ailonit, Isha ve'eina Isha. It's sometimes treated as a wife and sometimes not as wife. What does that mean? Sometimes she treated as a regular wife and receive a regular Ketubah, the money of the contract. Sometimes not, and she not receive it. Versus almana, a widow that marry a high priest, isha gmura. It's considering as a total wife. So he elaborated and he said, I don't need isha ve'na isha ikir ba yesh la ketubah, lo ikir ba en la ketubah. It's all depend upon if he know about it. If he know that about in advance, so she received the ketubah in a case of divorce. Versus he doesn't know, then she is not. Why then is considering a mekach ta'ut, which means that all misleading information, and therefore he is not committed, he is not obligated monetarily to those financial commitment. Almana isha gmura, ben ikir ba, ben shelo ikir ba. Widow is considering a full wives, regardless if he knew about it, meaning the Kohen Gadol knew that she is a widow when he married her, or he's not. Yesh la ketubah, like a regular wife, even she misled him and she was basically prohibited to him. Not everyone agree with that. The Rav Yehuda Omer, he disputed that and he said, Achat zo ve'achat zo, regardless to if it's Ailonit or Almana to Kohen Gadol, Isha ve'ena Isha, Hikir ba yesh la ketubah, lo hikir ba en la ketubah. He said in general, as long as he knew about it, we treat it with Ketubah. If he doesn't know, which means that it was hidden information from him, things happen either surreptitiously, clandestinely, or all kind of other misleading information the person doesn't know, so therefore he is not responsible, and unlike Rav Huna. So then Gemara responded and said, Lo teima hastama ela ketubah ela ima knasa bechezkat she'ena ken v'nimtzeh she ken en la ketubah. If it turns that she was lying and she said that she will never be thrown to anyone ever, and then it turned that she wasn't truthful, then she doesn't have a ketubah. I have a friend that in a case like that, he married someone with the wrong information, and it turns to be that he wasn't the correct husband. She claimed that he is the third one, and it turned to be that he was, if I'm not mistaken, 6 or 7 one, and she hid information from her husband over the past husbands whom she civilly did not divorce, and therefore by us the manner of the get and divorce is 1, 2, 3. It's not an issue because it's mekach ta'ut, it's misleading information. The person married with a false information, and therefore is nothing to talk. Aval stama mai. However, when is a situation that he just married her, he doesn't tell her that if he will not marry her if she is a widow, what's the halacha? Itla, you mean to say that she deserved the ketubah? You can ask adetane, until you speak about Kohen Gadol marry a widow בחזקת שהיא כן ונמצאת שהיא כן, יש לה כתובה להשמיעינן סתמה וכל שכן ה. So they said, ועוד furthermore תנא כנסה בידוע, he knew that she is a widow, ונמצאת בידוע, יש לה כתובה, כנסה סתם, אין לה כתובה. Due to the Rav Huna, that's the opposite. Rav Huna matnitin at itei. Rav Huna misconstrued the Mishnah by understanding the differentiation between Ailonit, if he is knowledgeable or not. Who savar Rav Huna hold me the kamaflik ba'Ailonit velo kamaflik ba'Almana, because the Mishnah differentiated Ailonit, that if he knows about it in advance or not, and not speaks about the knowledge about widows, that if he doesn't know earlier or not, a widow meaning to a high priest, Michlal d'Almana afilu b'stamana meitlei. So you understand in the regular case in the widows, so where one is merely marrying her without knowing that she's a widow, she's entitled for payment for a marriage contract. However, in truth, velohi ki katan elal almana plugta da'alonit kai. When the Mishnah teaches the halacha in regard to widow, it based on the differentiation stated in regard to Ailonit. So the Mishnah intended for the distinction between whether the husband was aware of her situation before the marriage, which was stated in the case of Ailonit, to apply in a case of the widow as well, and therefore in the case that he doesn't know and he married her in a regular manner, the Mishnah agreed that she doesn't receive a ketubah because it's considering a mekach ta'ut, a false understanding, and that's the way Rav Yehuda holds. So the Noda Yehuda, the great Rabbi Landau, have a long response based on this. The whole concept of mekach ta'ut, when you say that it's something that is misleading information or not, Another derivative from that is a wonderful book called Or Sameach. It's a great rabbi in a past generation who asked a question, and that's good for Steve to hear. The situation that a person went to a restaurant, and for example, you go to New York City and there are many restaurants there, many kosher restaurants, and the person start eating or order a dish or something, and then it turns that the food is not kosher. Meaning the guy claimed, you see sometimes a sign at kosher and it's not. So he said, so he want to step out, so they present him the bill. He said, I have a misinformation. I thought that this place is kosher, and based on that I order and I start eating, and now it turns that it's not. So is that considering a mekach ta'ut, a misleading information, doesn't need to pay, or not? So basically, based here on this case, when she told him that she never have a relation with any man, and then it's turned to be a widow, then it's a different story, because here you said that he needs to give her a get, but basically it's total misconception. Versus when you come to a restaurant and you see a sign, so and you see if you are smart enough, kashrut certificate, you recognize who gave it. It's a total different way of treatment, and therefore you treat it accordingly. I think I told you once, someone attended a falafel store, and the guy has a lot of pictures of great rabbis behind him. So he said to the guy, are you kosher? He said, definitely. He says, do you have a certificate? He said, what do you mean certificate? Don't you see all these rabbis' pictures? So the guy said, if you have those rabbis standing here and your picture is behind the camera, then for sure I'll buy it from you. But if you're are the one who sells and the picture is behind you, I cannot purchase from here. Hadran alach almana nizonet. This is the completion of chapter 11.
Boyachem leshuloim malachai yeshuloim malachai